We are live. Welcome to the Bradbury Challenge, the podcast where three writers attempt to write one short story each week. My name is Maya, and I am here with Gerald and Chrissy. How are you guys doing this week?
Fantastic. You're going to hate me.
Brilliant.
It's okay. Someone's got to do fantastic. Somebody. That's awesome. How about you, Gerald?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
You're wonderful. Fantastic. That's great.
How are you, Maya?
Do tell.
It's been a very long week. Very long. So first, before I get into my story, did you guys finish your stories?
I did. Actually,
Yay!
finished my story, and then I wrote half of another story, and then I wrote a plot for a third story.
Wow.
Oh, that's awesome. That is so awesome.
Yeah.
Are they related or are they three
No.
separate? That's so
Yeah.
cool. Congratulations. The one that you finished, was it the one you've been working on for the past couple weeks?
No, the one I finished was the prequel to my trilogy, so I will be able to put that out not very long after the final one coming out. I'm still trying to hear back from my freaking editor.
Mm-hmm.
But
Famous
yeah.
last word. Well, I'm really happy for you. Gerald, how about you?
Yay. I wrote one, which actually is probably going to turn into the first chapter of something longer. I've written another one, and I've written half of a third one, which is going into a local competition.
That's really awesome.
I think if Gerald doesn't write at least 2 stories every week, then he's failing.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Gerald, what would happen if you slowed down and only wrote one story in a week? No, this is a real question.
What?
This is a real question. It's
Oh,
coming from,
okay.
my literary side. I'm like, you write such good stories and you write them so quickly. What would happen if you focused on one story?
You mean if he spent more time on it and made it even more awesome?
Yeah, would he be an award-winning author in a year?
No, I don't think
Be
How
winning a
many
push
stories has he published, though?
that's
You
the-
have to publish to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I know, but that's what I'm saying. He's good enough that I think, if he did one story and just really just spruced it up like no one's business, he could get published.
Yeah.
I want to see him winning some amazing literary prize or something, because he says it's not literary fiction, but a lot of it is.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah, and it's good. And you hear me every
Maya
week. So
is
you
your
know
fan.
that I don't say that
Yeah,
lightly.
She's like your number one fan.
Yes, I'm misery. I'm going to trap you in your house and chop off your legs until you write more stories and get published.
Lovely.
I'll only release you when you win a push cart.
Yeah. This
There's my
podcast is
story
going down a
week.
strange thing. Yeah, strange.
And now you know what our prompt for the day is. So,
Well, I did not do so awesome.
Oh,
I didn't write this week.
at all?
Matter of fact, I am in the process of taking everything I own and getting rid of it by tomorrow, with the exception of a couple boxes that are going to my kids and what will fit in my car.
wow.
And it's kind of stressful. So,
you have to move now.
yes, actually. Hence why I can't find batteries, or why I've been scattered for the past couple weeks. So what happened is, and this does pertain to writing, because we recently did an interview, and it's going to be up sometime this week, with Karam Bajaj, and he was talking about, all the things that he's done in order to really focus on his art, sacrificing for his art, stuff like that. And so what pretty much happened is, everybody knows I've been planning on leaving the country right around August. Leave the country for a couple reasons. I can lower my living expenses to such a point that I can spend more time writing, and I can work on getting my novel revised and out to editors, out to agents, take that next step. The second reason why is because my kids are both going to college, and I wanted to travel when I got pregnant, and obviously got pregnant, and suddenly, instead of wanting to travel, I wanted my mommy. So I had two main reasons for leaving the country.
Wait, you wanted your mommy, or you wanted to be?
Oh,
mommy?
when I got pregnant, I was like, "Mommy."
Okay, just clarifying.
This is a common story. Your parents know nothing until you get pregnant, and suddenly you want nothing more than to be with your mommy. So
I'm weird then.
so that was going on, and then my son graduates June 9th. So the plan was he graduate, he moved down to his sister's for a month, spend a month with her, and then we find him a place close to a really good junior college that has really high transfer rates. There's only like a couple junior colleges that in my opinion are worth the time, and this is one of them. And then I would leave the country beginning of August. So landlord decides to call me 2 months ago and says, "I'm selling. You have to be out the last of May 30th, right before my son graduates. I mean, not May 30th, April 30th, right before he graduates." So I've been looking for 3 months for a place and haven't been able to find one because I'm leaving and nobody here does, even some leases, they don't exist. And
Right.
I'm not willing to sign a longer lease and stay in an area that's too expensive and put off writing and finishing my novel for another year because I have to spend so much time trying to make ends meet.
Yeah.
So we found a roommate situation and it fell through last week.
Oh.
Yeah. So all this week, I'm like, where am I going to live? I'm leaving next week, but where to? So I managed to find a neighbor that will take my son for the next month. And that way I can pick up and go to the area where this junior college is and find him a place. And I'm going to be leaving sooner. And in between the time that I go there and the time that I find a place, I'm going to be doing that thing a lot of writers are doing where they're like living in vans and RVs, only I'm going to be living in a 1988 BMW 325i.
Wow. That's different.
I've got a tent. There's lots of beautiful camping, but
wow.
Oh my God.
I've done that before.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much stuff you get when you've been in a place for 11 years.
Yeah.
I would never had stuff. I was always a minimalist. But when I had the kids, I tried to do the traditional things that they wouldn't feel weird. And there's just so much stuff. So I've been giving away stuff for 2 weeks, and this week is crunch week. And so no writing happened. But on the plus side, I'm actually kind of looking forward to this. This is the kind of adventure I would have had in my 20s. Right. And I'm kind of looking forward to finding like some nice woods somewhere and parking my butt with my 300-page manuscript and a bunch of pens and just editing in the woods somewhere. Like, I'm actually looking forward to this.
I've done that before, and I just no
more. I've done it before too. But I actually kind of liked it.
So the crazy thing, because I was homeless for 2 years, and so I did the whole living in an RV thing and living in a tent and not having electricity, and my boyfriend and I have discussed getting a tiny house because they're cheaper, they're more they're economical for like water and electricity and everything. And so we're both saying as soon as the children leave, we're probably going to get a tiny house and move somewhere more affordable.
Yeah.
But that's completely different than what you're talking about, because you can have a space with electricity and water and a running toilet, whereas
none of that.
What you're doing,
wow.
I
don't ever want to do that
camping,
again,
man, by the ocean and near rivers. It's gonna be beautiful. But I am a camper, and I'm totally all about like tiny houses, minimal living.
Right.
So that part of it doesn't freak me out. And in this, it's funny because I've done this before, but then I was homeless for like 6 months. But this time I don't feel like I'm homeless because I have my car and I have like an awesome freaking tent. Like
it feels way different. Yeah,
it's a little different, but it is backwoods tiny house living where I'm going to be going into town every day to hook up to internet so I can do my job
and charge your appliances.
Charge all my appliances, do my job, look for a roommate situation for my son, and then the minute he finds one, and the minute he gets a job, I'm out. So instead of leaving in August, it looks like I'm going to be leaving in like July.
Wow.
And the other question is, originally I was not planning on taking my car to Central and South America. there's all kinds
you
of
leave it
sketchy
for your
things about
son?
driving in Central and South America. But at the same time, there's all kinds of sketchy stuff about taking buses and stuff in Central and South America. And so I had to deal with my car because my car hasn't been legal. And if I'm going to be sleeping in my car and someone knocks on my window, I don't want any reason for them to do more than just knock on my window. So I spent all day yesterday getting it all legal and getting it all ready. It's going to be my little writing cabin on wheels. And I realized my car is not in as bad shape as I thought it was. So I'm thinking I may actually take my car. Wow. And it's old enough that it's not going to attract too much attention. I wouldn't drive through Central and South America in like a Prius or something nice.
No.
But this car's so old. It's a little bit more like it kind of disappears into the background a little bit more. So it looks like that's happening too. So it's been a very eventful week for me.
Crikey.
Poor Gerald. He's like, crikey. You're one to talk. You run around in an RV. What's the difference?
There's just the sort of strange thing is, yes, we do go on extended trips in the motorhome, which is like a mini. This is like a mini RV, and and we live in it, and we've got a solar panel and all this sort of stuff, and we don't hook up, and it's.
I was gonna say, yeah, you could probably find a cheaper RV for like $100 or something on
but I love
Craigslist.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure it runs. I know my car runs. It's a known entity.
So we can totally live for an extended period in this little smallish RV. But when we moved to where we live now in the house, it was a conscious decision to buy a house because we knew lots of people who were just selling houses, getting a van, and just going and disappearing. But I wanted the stability of a house, and it's just a psychological thing. But that's fair enough. But yeah, I love tiny houses. I love minimalist living. I love living off grid. It's fantastic. It's a free.
I have a friend with an amazing tiny house. Every time she sends me pictures, my first thought is that is my writing cabin in the future. That is where I want to hole up and just write. And there's one tiny house that's been featured in a lot of magazines where one wall is all glass.
That one's on. Yeah, it's on the tiny house.
The floor moves back, and the floor is glass underneath the deck. And so he's sitting there writing, and he's just looking at the woods, and he looks down, you can see into the grass. I'm like, so much poetry could be written there.
Oh yeah.
There's that tiny house show that's on Netflix, and the first episode is them making. They call it the lantern in the woods, and one wall is just a bunch of windows. And it's gorgeous. It lights up in the middle of the night, and underneath there's a glass panel on the floor too, and there's a stream running underneath of it. It's beautiful.
That is like my dream. But at the same time, I know that as a writer, I need to be in the community talking to people on a regular basis. And I'm such a natural hermit. I think if I were to go just that route, I would never leave. Like I would have my groceries drop shipped by some drone, and I just would never leave my tiny house. And so I think if I ever am in a position to get a tiny house, I'm also going to have an apartment in a city so that I can go there like every few months and kind of like recharge my humanity.
Yeah.
So I don't run out of stuff to write.
That's true, actually, because you do, right. For me, writing is all about character, and you can't
people watching.
Yeah, and so many characters that we create come from people we know. People. I mean, one of the short stories I wrote this week, one of the pieces of flash I wrote this week is based on sort of based on a character local to here that somebody was talking about, and he's such a great character. So yeah, I think you do have to interact with people as a writer, not all the time.
So Gerald, I know that you finished your series. So where did the inspiration for this week's stories come from?
That's a good question. Yeah, as I say, one was somebody was talking about this local character who runs boat trips for people to see the seals. We've got seals around here, so but he's a fascinating character. And I've transposed him into a different situation. So that just sort of went bang. and the other one was a rail accident that happened some miles north of here, and that sort of sparked an idea for something. As I say, that's probably going to be the first chapter of a longer work. And the third one is a competition, and it's a locally based competition within our county of Essex, and they want a short crime story based in the county. So because where we live is like, it's sort of like the end of the world. We're like on a headland, so you go sort of further and further, and then you can't go any further. And it's quite isolated. It's lovely, but it's quite isolated and bleak, and you've just got a lot of water and sand and grass, and that's a great place to fit body. So, not that I ever have.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And Chrissy, where did the inspiration for your story come from this week?
Well, it's the prequel to my trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
So there is one of the characters in it. It's she's the mother witch. She's like 300 years old, and she goes around from one place to another rescuing young girls who are supposed to be sacrificed to the Kraken for being witches. And so I thought I would write her backstory, her origin, and how she became the mother in the first place. And so it's
which came first, your novel series or the idea for the short story? Is this a short story that's been in your head for a while? Okay.
Yeah. So the trilogy itself actually started as one idea for one single novel, and when I started writing it, it accidentally became a trilogy.
Yeah.
And then I got towards the end, I started working on the third part of it, or fleshing out the third part of it, and I got the idea for the short story, and so I started writing it. Now that the third story is done, I figured I'd finish it. So
that's pretty wonderful.
Yeah, and it's, how long is it? It's only 5,000 words, but
now I know that for me and Gerald, we're writing like contemporary fiction. We take a lot of our inspiration from stuff that's happening in the everyday. Him and his train accident, me and just running into random people that I'm like, really? I dated you?
Wow. Can't say I haven't thought that before. So
very good.
Don't know that I want to say that on the air though.
I don't put them in because they're bad. I just put them in because I date such interesting characters. I can't date normal people. Normal people are just so bland.
Yeah.
You know what the wonderful thing about writing is? If you really hate somebody, you can kill them off in your story and nobody knows.
I haven't done that yet. Maybe I should do that to the one ex that won't go away. So
I've done that a couple of times.
I can do a ceremony and write a short story where he dies.
Yeah.
But where do you take your inspiration from, since it's mostly fantasy? Are you still taking your inspiration from the everyday?
Yeah. Well, so this week I finished the one story, and so that one was inspiration drew from the trilogy. The other one, what was it? I can't remember what the second one was. But the third one was a plot line I just wrote. And that one, I actually was, my boyfriend was watching a D&D show last night. And so while he was watching that, oh, that's right. Okay. So the second one was the one that I have half done is it's called Minotaur. And he was watching a group of gamers play D&D on Twitch last night. And there was one character that did this really big long spiel, and it gave me this idea for a story of my own. And so I started writing that, and that one's the one I have half finished. And then last night we were playing D&D ourselves, and there was something about some water creatures, and so I got an idea of a couple of people camping on the side of a lake and something going amiss in their camping spot, and then them finding some water sprites or something in the lake. So it's kind of a mixture of things I've actually done and things that I wish I had happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wouldn't it be cool to find some water sprites in the lake? Or wouldn't it be cool to have a dryad suddenly walk out of the forest and say hi? Or fly on a dragon, or I don't know, catch a griffin and tame it. I've written all of those stories.
That's cool. I've always wondered where you got the inspiration for Witch's Curse. It's such a unique idea. And when you first told me about it, I was like, where did that come from?
I honestly don't remember.
I came such an interesting idea.
Well, I wrote the idea. It's the main idea of a mermaid being cursed, like ages ago. And so the very first novel I wrote, it was about a girl who was cursed by death to die as soon as she fell in love, or everyone who came close to her and fell in love with her would die, and so it was a curse that she could never find love. And that was because I, as a young girl, grew up never being loved. My parents were not there for me. I didn't have any friends really. I was just lonely all the time. And so that kind of inspired that story. And I think that ended up in part of this story. But I'm older and better at writing, so it actually makes more sense and is less, angsty teenager and more growing up.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. When I look back at the stories I finished versus the ones I haven't, all the ones that I've finished were inspired by really, really strong experiences, really strong emotions. And all the ones I didn't were stories that I worked out that I thought, oh, that would be cool. And then I would start writing it and I would tail off. The first novel that I actually finished, The Rough Draft, Remigian Rising, at its core, it was really inspired by an ex of mine who was this amazing, sexy, gorgeous Asian man who didn't see it. He didn't see it. He had dated a slew of women that didn't see him that way. And literally the first time I told him he was hot, he was confused. And as we dated, it really brought to mind all these ideas of how Asian men are portrayed in the media and how they're usually not the love interest, and how that affected him growing up, never seeing himself as a love interest and not being around his dad to have that kind of vision. And so all of a sudden, after years of dating these women that, oh, you're nice, and then they date him anyway, and then they break his heart. He's got this woman that's like, you're hot, you're gorgeous, I want you. And he's like, what? On what planet are you from? This is highly uncomfortable. And it ended up ruining the relationship just because he couldn't see himself as wantable. And at its core, that's what started that book. And it was the first one I actually finished. And I think it was because it was inspired by something that was so strong. And I like the fact that you wrote down this idea and you kept it with you for so long.
Oh yeah, I have a whole file.
That happened to both of my books. Both of them were ideas I wrote down, and I was like, well, if I'm still thinking about this, maybe eventually I'll write it. And then like a year later, the idea was still haunting me. And it was like, that's when I knew that the story needed to be written. I think that's the challenge for the Bradbury challenge, because there isn't enough time for that kind of obsession to build.
Yeah.
Right.
And I find that I write best through that type of obsession where I've got an idea that literally won't leave me alone. But at the same time, I'm learning so much through the Bradbury challenge. I'm learning to kind of force myself to step aside and write on things that, I haven't been percolating for so long.
Right. So I guess I have a similar where I need to percolate a little bit, but not quite as bad as you, because I've been writing down a bunch of different short story ideas and stuff and just having them in a file I call Bradbury challenge for, Scrivener. And I'll just, when I want to do that short story for that week, I'll just start going through them and, read them all. And so I found a few of them that I've added more words to them, and I keep fleshing out the idea. That's how I wrote an entire plot for a new novel, was because one of those ideas was in there, and I'm like, wait, that would make a great novel. And just wrote a whole plot, and it's like 5,000 words now. So I write constantly. It's just the finishing part is still.
But I think you are doing that. You're doing the same thing I'm doing. You're just doing it in a different way. Because all that time you're just adding to these ideas until it becomes a plot.
Right.
That's my version of having the idea in the back of my head and trying to ignore it and having it away.
I know ideas in the back of my head eventually flutter out like little birds. So I need to write it down. And I've been writing down. I've had like notebooks and stuff with me constantly. So from like, little tiny childhood, because ideas don't stick in my head. So now I have a program on my phone that it's constantly with me, and I will pull it out in the middle. I pulled it out in the middle of D&D last night, and I was writing a story snippet from that I had an idea for, and my boyfriend's afterwards, he's like, you're on your cell phone a little much during D&D, and I'm like, I had a story idea, gotta write it down. Sorry.
Yeah. How about you, Gerald? Do you percolate ideas like that?
Sometimes, because I've been writing for quite a long time, and I tend to write quite quickly, and I now have quite a lot of time to write. I've written a lot of stuff. I've got 1,200,000 words of stuff sitting on my computer that are. There's about 4 finished first drafts. But they're not really good enough. They're ideas and they're sort of they're stories, but they're not good enough. So they're just sitting there waiting. And it was only a couple of years ago when people started talking about writing a series of books and how much better it is if you're self-publishing and I thought, I do have some sort of similar themes that keep cropping up in my stories. So I then started looking at them, and that's when I sort of segregated my writing, and it falls into 3 distinct areas. So it's short dark fiction, which can be sci-fi, crime, horror, supernatural, any old thing. I've got crime fiction, and I've got thrillers and sort of political type thrillers. And that's all I write. And it's funny. I was for one nano. I don't know if it was last year or the year before. I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll write some fantasy. That can't be that difficult, can it? And
famous last words, right?
Wow. And I spent about 2 or 3 weeks thinking, I'm going to write a fantasy novel. I'm going to write a fantasy, and I just went, what? And I didn't do it. But one thing so I ain't going to do that. But one thing I was
Is it really difficult?
Yes, I can't write fantasy.
Yeah, I found it difficult. But there we go. It just didn't click with me. And but coming back to what you said earlier about having a cabin in the woods, but then an apartment in the city to interact with people, I was talking to someone a few weeks ago, sort of writer friend, and talking to them in real life, like person to person, and she was talking about dreams, and she said, "Oh, I have dreams every night, and I always write them down." And I said, I don't dream. Dreams aren't practical. If I do, I never remember them. They're just here.
I love my dreams.
And that very night, I had a dream about this crime story, and when I woke up, I remembered it, and it's called Dirty Little Secrets, and it's going to be my next crime novel. So
that's awesome.
That is so cool.
so again, just a conversation with a fellow writer, and that happened. So you've definitely got to interact with people, and I think especially in real life too. It's no good just chatting over the internet and stuff like that. I think conversations, even on something like Blab or Hangouts, it's not quite the same as person to person, and you can interact much better and much quicker in face to face.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Just being able to see full body language, being able to have that energy exchange.
Chrissy making faces at you.
Yeah, exactly. Um, I find it so valuable for my writing. I would like to say valuable for my life, but let's just be frank. I could be perfectly happy living in the middle of nowhere, not talking to anybody. But after 10 years, I would turn into the Unabomber. that's
You know
not in the
what?
direction I want to be heading.
So, I have spent the majority of my life just, away from people. When I was little, we lived 30 miles from town, and I had like one friend I could go see every once in a while, and otherwise it was me and my sisters. And at school, I had no social skills, so I'd go to school and I had no friends. Then I got married and I lived 30 miles from town in my little house where I had no phone, no internet, no nothing, because the internet didn't exist back then. And so I didn't learn I liked people until I was 25 and got an actual job. I mean, I always thought, I'm an introvert, and I still am an introvert, but I need like that interaction with people every once in a while.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I started going stir crazy. And now I have a job where I will go a week without seeing another human being sometimes, and I'm going stir crazy.
Really? See, I have a similar story as far as growing up and not having friends and just being very introverted, shy. Not necessarily shy because I was like loud and boisterous, but just imagine.
No.
But I didn't talk to people very often, and I'm perfectly happy being all by myself. Thing is, I'm healthier if I get a dose of human every once in a while.
Yes.
And so like I literally can stay in my condo for weeks and not see a neighbor.
See,
with no problem.
Yeah, I'll do that too, and I will realize after a while that I'm getting stuck in that, and that I will have to force myself to leave the house, because I know if I don't leave the house, I will just stay there. So I felt myself, because I spent like literally 30 years of my life not seeing very many people outside of my immediate family. I was on my way to agoraphobia.
Yeah.
Before I got my real first job, and I had to get the job because we had no other way of making money.
Yeah.
But that brought me out of that situation so that I could start making friends, and I learned that, I like people sometimes. I liked it because there was a counter in between me and the people.
I find it interesting to say that, because that's why I started bartending, was because I wanted to be around more people in order to improve my writing.
I want that counter in between.
I don't like being in a bar. I don't, as a customer, I cannot stand being in a bar. Get me behind the counter, I'm perfectly happy. I don't like being in a restaurant with a whole bunch of people all talking and having dinner together. Like, I'll go to a restaurant by myself, find a corner table, and be so happy. I'm just plumb happy. But if I'm working there, it forces the interaction. So throughout my life, there have been times where I felt that my introverted nature was hurting my art. And I've always turned around and gotten a job that forced me to interact with people, even if it was just for a few months.
Right.
Just to kind of break that habit. And I think it was a really good tool for me. You know, I did a lot of really good writing when I was bartending. A lot of good writing. Yeah. Just because I was constantly talking to people, and the banter, and listening to people, and overhearing their stories, especially late at night when the old guys would come in and they're in there by themselves, and then all the stories come out.
Right.
My writing just blossomed in that environment. Absolutely blossomed.
Yeah.
So we are rounding up on 35 minutes. Do either of you want to read something from this week's work?
I have a little.
Okay, Gerald, take it away.
Oh, okay. Where's it gone? Sorry.
You tease.
No, I was adopting literary roadhouse techniques of minimising the word prose, the document, so it's out of the way. And I thought, where's it gone? Anyway. So this is the thing based on a local character. The old trawler bobbed quietly, the easterly breeze over an outgoing tide causing small waves to form and dissipate on the surface of the water. Jim knew that they were largely protected from the worst of the winds down here at the creek. The boat formed a crib, rocking him gently as he looked up from his book. He cast an inexperienced eye over the cloud formations, not knowing what they meant, but enjoying them anyway. He imagined Sarah sitting at home, fingers deftly multitasking with wool and wooden knitting needles. She'd said she was going to knit him a thicker jumper to keep him warm on his fishing trips. He'd invited her to join him just the once, a long time ago, but she declined as he knew she would. Sarah, who would get seasick treading in a puddle, would never want to join him out here in the deep blue ocean. The breeze picked up a little, a small offshoot of hair brushing his ear, reminding him he needed to book an appointment soon. That would wait until he got home, though. Here he was, mastering the waves and the weather and the recalcitrant fish, bringing home something fresh for supper. What would it be today? A small cod, maybe a skate, perhaps a few sardines? That would be nice. He twisted his body, looking back along the edge of the pontoon with the marina clubhouse in the distance. Chris, the real fisherman, wasn't back yet. Jim looked at his watch. Plenty of time. Even if Chris wasn't, Jim needed to leave. He could tell Sarah that the fishing was light today and would have something from the freezer. That's mine. So he's a guy who goes out. He tells his wife he's going fishing, and he just sits on his boat all day in the harbour.
I always thought that's what guys did when they went fishing.
I suspect most of them do.
Well, they might just sit there with the line in the water, but they're still just sitting there.
That's just an excuse,
right? Exactly.
And Chrissy,
okay. Katrina sat in a sea of people, all of them moving at once. They were big as trees, towering over her. Though she clung to Mama's hand, Katrina shivered. The big people were screaming at someone, shouting and calling names she'd never heard before, but she didn't need to know what they were to know they were bad. Just the way they screamed them told her so. The bodies pressed in, jostling her against Mama, and she clung with all her might as the sea of people tried to sweep her away. Mama, she screamed, but no one could hear her above all the voices, the screaming, the crying. Mama grabbed her and pulled her up into her arms. Safer, Katrina sank down into Mama's embrace, feeling Mama tighten her grip, keeping her safe from the crowds. Look away, Katrina, Mama cried. Don't look. It was an order. Mama gave so few orders, and Katrina tried to obey them all. She did now, shutting her eyes tight as she lay her head against Mama's shoulder, but the commotion outside her arms, or her mother's embrace, was too enticing. Katrina wanted to look, wanted to see what the people were yelling at, wanted to see what angered them so. She blinked, catching glimpses of people towering over a small figure at their feet. Another blink, red blood covering the small figure's face, hair a mess. It was a girl with short hair lying on the ground. The girl tried to scramble to her feet, slipping on the wet stones. She wasn't much bigger than Jamie, Katrina's neighbor who came to watch Katrina when Mama was in the fields. But Jamie was always smiling and happy. This girl was crying, dirty tear tracks down her face, and she pulled herself away from the crowd, clawing at the stone to get away. Why are they so mad, Mama? Did she do something bad? Look away, Katrina. You're so young. You shouldn't see this. Mama pushed through the crowds, elbowing people to get out of the way. Katrina watched as the tiny figure got swallowed up by the crowds, and still she could not understand why they were hurting the girl. Mm-hmm. There you go.
Wow. I like the people tall as trees to the little girl.
Yeah.
Eyes.
So did you guys have any obstacles this week that you had to overcome in order to write your stories?
Only one. I am currently job searching. And I've had to go to the doctor a couple of times because I'm trying not to be fired.
Okay.
And how did you overcome those obstacles? Because you've been really stressed out all week. Like, you've been sick. Your boss is like, why are you still sick? So what have you been doing in order to keep writing?
Well, I got to work the other day and I'm like, fuck this. I don't care anymore. It's like, if you fire me, you fire me. I don't care. And, And I just like, I'm doing what I need to do. I'm helping my customers. And if that's not good enough, then clearly I shouldn't be there. And so I just let it go.
So just letting go. Yeah.
Started writing.
Let it go. Let it go. No, was that not good? Okay, Gerald.
Good. It was good, but you don't want that.
How about you?
No, I don't think I had any. No. Getting ready for the holiday stroke road trip is taking up a bit of time. There's a lot of things to do, but I always find time for writing. It's
yeah, I think you've been writing with this sort of pattern, with this sort of schedule long enough that when things pop up, you just kind of work around
He's
them,
like, whatever,
almost without realizing it. You know, I see that in you a lot, and it's something that I admire, actually. You know, because when me or Chrissy have stuff going on, we're like, okay, so now we gotta make a point to fit our writing in, make a point to not get distracted, and you just kind of separate the life and put the writing where it needs to go and just let the rest of life like go around it like a sea, and it just is what it is. And it's quite nice to see. It's inspiring for me.
I think it's the fact that I'm retired obviously helps, because if I was working full time, then all the other stuff would take up all my spare time.
Right.
So finding time to write would be a lot more difficult. But it's so to me, I have to do something.
It's like the difference between writing full time and making your living from your writing, and trying to ease into writing full time from a full time job. I mean, you spend 8 hours a day at your full time job. That's a third of your life. That means you have 2/3 left for everything else, including writing, because most employers do not like it if you write on the job.
Really?
Yeah, there is that.
So, yeah. And then if you have...
So, Chrissy?
What? I was going to say, if you have complications like looking for new jobs or other things going on too, it reduces your writing time. So you have to guard those hours preciously.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're important hours.
That's true.
Both for the art and the sanity of the artist, because there's nothing that will, like, I need to write.
Mm-hmm.
That's what gives my life purpose. And I can't let it slide to the side just because I'm busy or just because I'm distracted.
Right.
Like, I have to write something. So yeah, I have to make that a priority in my life. I need to be more like Gerald.
Well, soon you'll have no choice.
Yeah.
You got the writing prompt this week, right?
Okay. Yep.
Okie dokie. So what is our writing prompt?
It is this jeweled pin.
Our listeners can't hear that. You have to describe it.
Okay, so we're gonna put a picture up of it, but it is a dragon, like a Chinese dragon, enamel pen with glittering rhinestones all across it. It could be diamonds or something, and it's as big as your hand, and it's blue and green and beautiful and kind of elaborate. Maybe it's on a woman who walks into your detective office or something like that.
I was instantly, when you showed that, I was thinking Sherlock.
Yeah, I know, right?
You know, the episode with the jade pen, and they're like, do you have it?
Right.
I'm not Sherlock.
Well, it's very Art Nouveau kind of, or what is it? You know, back in the day when they used to wear lots of costume jewelry.
Pop art,
and so
like that, maybe.
Huh?
Pop art, or is it a bit like
that?
Yeah.
And I know back if you get certain pieces of costume jewelry, it's actually worth quite a bit, because it was more expensive back then.
Yeah, I used to have a whole bunch of Art Deco costume jewelry when I was little, but I didn't know its worth, and so I played with it until it all
Of
died, and
course.
now I regret it. I regret it so much, because I had all these caretakers who were really old,
Uh-huh.
and I would go rummaging through their stuff because I was bored, and then they would constantly give me stuff, and so I had all this like really cool stuff from like the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, and it's all
Wow.
gone, all of it.
Yeah. That's the way it goes.
Dang it!
Yeah. Move on.
But I had so much fun with it while it
Awesome things
lasted.
are spoiled on the youth.
There you go.
So I want to let everybody know that a photo of the writer's prompt will be on the website, along with the show notes at literaryroadhouse.com. And we are working at getting caught up on all of the Bradbury challenges as far as getting them on the podcast feed. One thing that really would help is if we had enough money in order to hire an audio editor. And so if you want to help us reach that goal, definitely visit our Patreon campaign at www.patreon.com/literary roadhouse. Ciao.
Bye.